Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another Winters and Winters conversation, but we're bringing in someone that's not a Winters. I feel like this is a special occasion to allow that to happen, but more of those hopefully coming as well. But the first to really join us, so Andrea Shoaf is one of our team members here at Goby. She's recently joined us a couple months ago. We actually stole her as a former GRESB reviewer that worked at the GBCI. So we're excited to have her today. A big focus of what we're going to be thinking about is we're in the midst of response checks happening, GRESB submittals right around the corner. So it's going to be a key focus. And we'll dive into a couple of those details and things to be expecting, tips and tricks. So with that, Dan, thank you for joining. Andrea, thank you for joining on this almost summer day.
Hooray, hooray, the last day of May.
Yeah, we are. We're recording this on the last day of May. And in Chicago, it's like 40 degrees and raining. Last week was 90. I don't know. We're getting close, hopefully.
Yeah, we're still warm here, but yeah, we're kind of getting that same weather, that hot cold.
Yeah, well, Andrea and Dan are both on my East Coast. We're in the Midwest. You guys got the East Coast. We are a nationwide conversation here. Well, with that, let's just dive in. So first of all, for those that have never maybe participated in GRESB previously, they might be getting asked questions of, do you want to submit for a response check? They might be looking at what the heck is a response check? So Andrea, I'm actually going to start with you here of what is a response check? What are things that you should be thinking about? Describe it for us.
So a response check is actually just having a validator go through your data, going through your documentation. So what they'll do is they'll go through, they'll look at your policies, they'll look at your plans, any type of documentation that you're going to upload to GRESB, and give you recommendations. Obviously, nothing is like do this and you get X. It's more of a conversation with a validator to say, we see that you have this, and here are some suggestions, maybe a different piece of documentation here. So really conversational, but really helpful to kind of have someone just go through your documentation and kind of give you some pointers.
And how long does that usually take, just from once you decide to participate in the response check, what is like a timing of that process look like?
So once you get on and you get your call scheduled, there's kind of two important dates to keep in mind. So once you have your date scheduled, really you want to leave about a week before your date that you have scheduled, to not touch your assessment. Really what that does is it gives the validator time to go in and look through all of the documentation you've uploaded. It can get really confusing if you have someone who is reviewing documentation and then at the same time people are uploading additional documentation. Then the validator you're not getting your money's worth out of your response check. Really, you want to have your response check as set as you possibly can, and you want to give them that week to go through it, so that you can, really have them go through what you're planning on submitting.
Michelle, can I hop in here for a second?
Absolutely.
So for anybody that's new that's dialed in here, here's what we're talking about. So GRESB is open in the second quarter from April 1st, and it closes on July 1st. So that's the due date. In this period, there's the opportunity to have one of the third-party validators, and that's one of the key things with GRESB, is that it's not just people coming in saying things. You have to upload evidence, and then that evidence is checked by a third-party validator. So Andrea was one of those folks for many, many years. And so what she's describing here is this process called the response check. People are ordering them right now, and the last day to order them is coming right around the corner. It's June 1st. There might be a little extra time, but June 1st is that date. So once you order that response check, then it triggers the opportunity for a 1-hour conference call with somebody like Andrea, who's going to take a look at your documentation and what you're uploading compared to the questions and say, you're looking great. Now, I might encourage you to take a closer look at question 6, because question 6 feels like you might be going a little bit over here, and you should really maybe think about being over here. So that's, from a real big picture, what this response check process is about. And I've sat in on some of these calls, several years ago when I was kind of new to GRESB and we were just really getting the benchmark established, and people find it very valuable. And so it's valuable for everybody. It's valuable for the participants as well as if they have a consultant and the reviewers. Everyone's learning.
Absolutely.
There's a little bit of that why. There's a little bit of the what. What about so you said it's due, the last date is June 1st, Dan. How do I sign up? Is it too late? If I'm posting this today, tomorrow, it gives me a couple of days. Are we too late?
So we just sent out a reminder in our newsletter that said midnight Pacific time on June 1st. That happens to be Memorial Day. So, I'm not aware if the coders have allowed a little extra time or not. I am aware, based upon some internal messaging today, that we're up to 80% capacity. There are 300 slots available, and so 241 have been reserved, leaving 79 to go. And so there is capacity, there is time, and to the extent that people want to do this, go for it.
And then the how they go about doing that, I believe that's in the GRESB portal. Is that correct?
Yeah. So when you're working on your assessment, there's a button that you can click to say request a response check.
Sounds easy enough. So log in, hit the button. Is there a cost to this, Dan?
Yeah, it's rounding error. I believe it's 750 or 1,750 euros, and I thought that was about $2,100 US. So forgive me if I'm off by $50.
Well, I didn't prep you that I would ask you that. I thought about it
Yeah,
on the fly.
I should know. I know.
No, I mean, I think that's, there's obviously some of those key values associated with that response check. You hinted on it, Dan, and we talked a little bit about how it works. It's not too late, but let's say I have 15 funds. I mean, that's maybe a lot. Maybe I have 5 funds. Do I submit all of them, Dan? Do I just submit maybe one? What should be some of that thought process there?
Well, I have my opinion, and then we'll hear from Andrea as well. I honestly think so. I was just on a call the other day with CBRE investors. They're going to submit 60 funds, 60. Do you imagine doing a response check for 60 funds? That'll take you the entire month. So I encourage no. It's generally one will get you, a good idea of the GRESB process and your documentation. There might be some different flavors based upon an EU fund versus an Asia fund versus a North America fund. So that would be one thing to consider. But given capacity and whatnot, it's usually one. Andrea, what do you think about that? Has that been your experience?
That would totally be my experience as well, is if you have very similar documentation across all of your funds, I think one is definitely sufficient. You'll get a really good idea of kind of how the validators are looking at things, how the validators are looking at certain questions or indicators, and you'll really kind of be able to pinpoint in your policies, in your documentation, what may need a little tweak, or what might need some extra documentation to prove that you are in fact meeting the intent of the indicators. But again, I would also agree, Dan, like if you have 2 funds that have completely different policies and different documentation, and it's very, very different, I would think it would be a very good idea to have both go through a response check with both of those funds and really be able to have them take a look at all of that documentation and be able to kind of help you on both of those.
Makes sense to me. And then once I go through that response check as well, do I have the opportunity to change things, right? Like you go through the response check, you guys give some really great feedback. If there's any, exactly as Dan said, hey, maybe go think about this kind of a conversation that might be having, but then I can go back and make those updates, right? Like that's kind of a key element.
Absolutely. And really, response checks go till, I mean, you can book a response check pretty much up until the submission date, which is July 1st. Not my recommendation. My recommendation is to leave yourself some time to be able to make any type of changes that you may need to make. And the idea here is that we are talking about a 2020 reporting period. So there's only so many changes that you can make. If you have a policy that was in place, you're not going to change your policy. That is not the intent. So really we're looking for, maybe some additional documentation or something else to kind of help bolster your point. So again, you're not redoing a lot of stuff. You're just kind of looking for maybe some extra documentation. But yes, definitely recommend leaving yourself some time to make those updates.
Well, so I think that's what Andrea said is an important point. What we're trying to do is elevate the industry, make sure that the intent and the requirements are met and matched. So it's not what it's not. It's not a consulting moment. It's a coaching moment. And the coaching moment is to have the best foot forward come from all of the participants. So that's really the intent behind this, and it helps the entire industry move forward around the globe.
And then I think the other point that Andrea made a little bit at the beginning, but just even to emphasize, it's really based off that qualitative portion, right? So it's really much on the policies that are being implemented, some of the narrative components. The quantitative side really isn't pulled into that response check, but instead, I know, Dan, we've talked about this. There's other attributes of the platform itself, the portal itself, that will help with some of those indicators of this number doesn't look right. But in terms of the response check itself, it's just really looking at that qualitative side, correct?
Right. So the asset level portal, there's two things. There's the Q&A that's happening on the one side, and then the asset level portal. So on the asset level portal, there's scripts and all sorts of data things that are happening in the back end. So to the extent that somebody puts in megawatts when they mean kilowatts, or that there's just some weirdness, like you can have assets that are empty, that are vacant, and it shows up with a really tiny EUI. We're going to flag that, and we're going to say, hey, this isn't looking like all of the other ones that are in here. Last year we had 100,000 assets. So we have a pretty sizable data set that we're looking for outliers. We will flag these outliers and say, hey, is this what you mean? We are not going to make judgments on that. You can certainly say, yep, that's exactly what we mean. But we want to highlight this, and because what we're looking to do is have the best quality data set that we can. And the only people that know what that quality looks like is the participant themselves, not us.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are, nice little triggers as well that you'll see along the way. Well, I think that's,
Sorry,
I think that's a great segue. Some of those other tips and tricks.
One thing, and I, really, really would recommend a response check is, this year the resilience indicators were introduced into the assessment, and they are not scored this year, but they are covered in a response check. And I would highly recommend people take advantage of being able to put out there what they're currently doing for resilience and climate change, and what their companies are doing, and how they, what documentation they have. And I highly recommend uploading that to GRESB and having, validators take a look at it and be able to comment on it, because next year it will be scored. And this is a really awesome opportunity to really get some good insight onto what you currently are doing, what you currently have, and maybe some places for, improvement, or some places, to take next steps.
So cool you brought that up, Andrea, because what we're doing, concurrently to get to November or October when the results come out, but then into the fourth quarter, is we're working on additional, call them products, right? So there's a TCFD report that I've been on calls, sort of user persona calls with both institutional investors like the New York Common Fund or fund managers over the past several weeks. And so all of the indicators that Andrea just brought up that have been baked into the assessment will have the opportunity to elevate into a TCFD oriented report. So that's going to be a new product availability, I suppose, coming up at the end of the year. And we're excited about that. The only way that you can take advantage of that is if, of course, you do those questions within GRESB. So, there you go. You've heard it here first.
We heard it from Dan's mouth. No, and I think that's perfect, and that helps, really paint the picture. And I think the last thing that maybe we'll end on is, as these participants are coming into their final hour here, Andrea, I'll start with you. Like, what are some other tips and tricks and things they should be thinking about? Or things that we even do, and at Goby, maybe we don't give away all our secrets, but what are some like easy things that they should be thinking about coming into the submission time?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that is important to kind of understand is when validators are looking at indicators, whereas in a response check, you have one validator who's looking across your entire assessment. When it comes to validation, you have a handful of validators who are looking at one indicator. So they are, they may be looking at that policy PO1, and that is it. They aren't looking at anything else from your assessment. So what you have in PO1 and what you put in PO2, you're going to have different people looking at. So make sure that each question or indicator stands on its own. So you don't want to say, oh, I've already uploaded this, refer to this indicator. Each individual indicator needs to stand on its own. And that may mean repeating and uploading the same piece of documentation to multiple indicators. That's fine. But I would say that's important to know. The other thing I would highly recommend, have someone in your company take a look at your assessment. Ideally, that someone who maybe doesn't know the fund as well, because if they are looking through it and kind of looking at your selections and looking at your documentation, if they don't understand something, most likely the validator is not going to understand a connection or some piece of the documentation. So just having some extra eyes on it, I think, is always helpful and can help make things, write a narrative, make things a little more clear to kind of make connections that if it's your fund, but if you're outside of that, you might not know.
That's so, Michelle, that was really interesting. So fresh eyes, right, are always helpful. 4 eyes are better than 2, although I'll take these off. And then, we offer this document library. And the document library can exist to say, okay, we've uploaded this, and it applies to 2 or 3 different things. So you can just take that and put it here, right? What you don't want to do, or you definitely need to have empathy for the other side, for a validator. So I've seen, and I'm aware of instances where people will just upload their annual report. Oh, it's in there. It's on page 72. What? No, they're not going to go find this on page. They're not going to read your whole annual report to go and dig it out of page 72. You need a cover page, and it says on page 72 in paragraph 3, we talk about this, right? Here's the document, here's the descriptor, and it needs to be for those that, it needs to be in English. So we do this globally, and we receive all types of assessments from all kinds of places. So English is the preferred language.
Yep, Dan, and just to kind of, jump off what you said, absolutely. And GRESB makes it super easy. They give you a cover page. They give you, the reference guide. Read the reference guide. I know that is not everybo's favorite thing.
I call that cure for insomnia, by the way.
Yeah.
But also, in the portal, there is a little circle with an I, and that's information. So you can click on that, and it's a mini section of the reference guide, and it shows the intent and the requirements and what is, what the documentation is that it's looking for. So you don't have to dig into a voluminous 200 or 300 page document. It's right there for you, but you have to know that that's what you need to click on.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's some really great advice. I think it's a nice little summary that we can share with the GRESB world as they're heading into these last few weeks here. And I think we wish everyone the best. And then I know maybe the next time we meet, we'll be talking about, we're submitted. Now what? Now what do we think about? Everyone go on summer vacation and come back to those results. But I appreciate the time, as always, Dan and Andrea, for joining. And thank you guys. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you
so much for having me.